So those would be some of the things. Cognitive behavioral therapy can be very helpful for folks that are on the spectrum if they're able to engage in it. Like you mentioned earlier, individualized talk therapy is probably not going to be very helpful for a person who is on the lower levels of this, because they're not going to be able to engage in it because of the concreteness of their thought. One of the things I do at the HMO that I was passionate about when I started there is I started a social skills group where people just go on a drop-in basis, adults, and get to know each other and to learn social skills. At the start of that group, we had a structured program with these lessons. We're going to learn this social skill, this work. And my co-facilitator and I at the time, we put together this great program, and we initiated, and it failed miserably because it reminded people too much of school. It was better.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We did all that work on it, too. So it was better to let them engage, talk to each other, have one or two group members bring up a problem that they're having in their life. For example, how do I get a date? How do I get a job? I can't get to sleep. How can I do that? Really kind of common life problems for a lot of people. Other group members would have the same problem, and we work together and how they can do with skills they can use in those areas.
Now, we're coming up on a break in about a minute, I guess, but I want to ask you, are there, you mentioned GI problems, but are there other associated medical or health problems for someone with autism?
Yes, and I believe part of this is due to the genetic difficulties that occur. Higher rates of asthma, higher rates of eczema, higher rates of GI symptoms, as well as the 30% seizure disorder in the population. Are we at the break now?
Yep, we're going to break, and we're going to come back with Dr. Rick LaBelle.
Okay.
Happy Oregon homeownership is the result of a good working relationship between the home buyer and their realtor. Make buying your Oregon home a fun and rewarding experience. Get our free guide to Happy Oregon homeownership. Act now, limited availability. Free at RealOregonHomes.com. That's RealOregonHomes.com.
Cook Immigration Partners is your passport through the immigration maze. Whether it's help with E-Verify in your business, or help in how to document a new employee under the new I-9 rules, or if you marry a foreign national, Cook Immigration Partners is your best choice for a legal advocate. Call us today at 866-286-6200. That's 866-286-6200, or visit us on the web at www.immigration.net.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back, listeners. We are here talking about the autism spectrum with Dr. Rick LaBelle, who is a specialist in it. And before the break, we were talking about medical and health problems for someone with autism, and we were talking about sleep and GI problems. Any others that you didn't name?
I did mention the seizure disorder. The higher percentage, 30% more people have epilepsy that are on the spectrum. However, warning to parents, an EEG may be abnormal in people with the autism spectrum disorder for reasons we don't know. So just because a child has abnormal EEG does not mean they have autism. And I just want to make that point.
Okay, and then what are the signs of autism in an adult?
Well, if somebody's on the moderate to severe range of the scale, level 2 to 3, it's pretty obvious due to the behaviors, the hand clapping, the self-stimulating, the stereotypical behaviors that occur there. Somebody is on the more mild to the higher moderate side, level 1 or the higher level 2, usually a deficit in social interactions that's noticed. We mentioned lack of eye contact earlier, and many people may have learned to make eye contact, so they do it. But sometimes their eye contact might be odd and a little bit too direct. They don't know where to break and blink like neurotypical people do. Socially interrupting, talking excessively about their topics. And one thing I do want to make sure is we have time so I can give people some additional resources that I found very helpful in this area. So at the end, I really want to make sure we have time for that so people get more information on that, okay?
Okay, absolutely. What are the daily struggles of an adult with autism?
Not having a daily routine for the most part, unless somebody is working or going to school, their life is very unstructured, and their parents try to make a structure for their life, and it becomes problematic. The most important thing, I think, for somebody in the spectrum to have is the ability to live independently as much as possible, whether it's with their parents and working or doing something else, or living independently in assisted living, not assisted living, but a supportive skill development home is the term I wanted to use, and being aware that that child needs to have a good quality life doing different things. Just being at home is no good for any of us.
Well, in doing some research about autism, I learned that Dan Aykroyd and Daryl Hannah are on the autism spectrum. So having that diagnosis doesn't mean you can't be a star. And you just discussed the various ranges, and I guess they must be high-functioning.
Yes, absolutely. This has become a more well-known diagnosis. Like many other mental health diagnoses, like bipolar, people who are well-known in the public eye or politicians are coming forward with those that they have those diagnoses to reduce the stigma. People with autism can be very, very intelligent, as we see with some of the folks who are probably working in Silicon Valley who may be on the spectrum, as well as low-functioning. There's a great magazine put out quarterly called Autism Asperger's Digest. That's Autism Asperger's Digest. It's a great magazine for folks. I highly recommend it. You can look at them online as well, too.
Interesting. Oh, boy, I hope people go get that. And the other statistic I learned is only 17% of young adults on the spectrum between the ages of 21 and 25 have ever lived independently. And I want to know, from your perspective, is that true, that most adults are likely to live with their parents? And what happens when their parents die?
That's a big question. About 50 to 60% of the people who have autism are living in some type of supported living, whether it's a skill development home or with their parents. Most of them are with their parents. Really important for their parents to have a plan in place for this as well, too, and for the parents to work with the regional center. They have mental health services through their insurance, whatever services may be available there, to have their child live as independently as possible and a plan in place. So, yes, that's very true, that is the case. Most folks don't live independently.
So that needs to be the goal for parents, to have their coming adult children live independently, because that way they can have their own life.
Yeah, and the folks that are low functioning spectrum, that's not going to happen, but you want to get them the best quality of life as possible. They're not able to live independently, but as much as possible is the goal.
Okay, as much as possible. And knowing that there are differences in levels of functioning, and that some adults have great strengths and others have lesser abilities, what are the challenges adults face in gaining independence?
Getting and holding a job. We mentioned before that the changes in routine can be very upsetting for someone that's on the spectrum. So as you can imagine, being in the workplace where things might change very quickly can be very difficult, as well as social interactions in the workplace. One adult who was very successful at his job, and his workplace required for some reason that every morning they have a 1-hour meeting, and half of the meeting was social interaction, getting to know each other. That was torture for this man. So he was willing to come out as having autism in this company, and he asked for an accommodation that he not have to go to that half hour of the meeting, attend the other half of the meeting, and work during the other half hour. So that would be an accommodation that could be made in the workplace. Putting somebody in a cubicle that might be farther away from people so they're not bothered by all the sensory stimuli going around them might be an accommodation that people can make, as well as in school as well, too. So these might be some of the things that might be helpful for folks. Part of it, too, is coming forward and saying, hey, I have this problem. And as I said before, there is a stigma associated with that.
Okay, so let's talk about romance in autism. What % of autistic folks are married? Do you know?
I don't know, but I do know that 5 to 10% of the people that are on the spectrum are in long-term relationships. And that's a great sign. Many of them may have children. Many of them are living normal lives, facing the normal challenges that we face, plus additional sensory issues and social interaction issues. More of this is folks that are on the higher functioning on the spectrum, or folks who may have Asperger's.
Okay, so I'm curious about what are their relationships like, and if their children are born on the spectrum.
Not necessarily born on the spectrum, but certainly at a higher rate for folks that are on have parents who are on the spectrum more likely to have autism. A great book for somebody who was in a relationship on either side of the relationship is called Loving Someone with Asperger's. Loving Someone with Asperger's by Cindy Ariel, Cindyariel, who is a psychologist. Great skills-based things, because people are on the spectrum, like we mentioned earlier, may have difficulty with sensory issues. So touching someone, holding someone may be uncomfortable. Making eye contact, looking in someone's eyes may be almost torture to them. So learning about that and working with that within the relationship.
Yes, and because that's very different than people not on the spectrum, how they interact. And I want to say that over time I have more patients coming to me with challenges they're facing because they married someone with an autistic child. Would you comment on what challenges might be if they do that and how they could affect a marriage?
It could affect a marriage greatly depending upon the people involved. And it also depends on the level of functioning that the child has, especially if they have an adult child at home. How high functioning is that child? And this could occur not only with autism, it could be Down syndrome, it could be some other developmental disorder or physical condition that would cause that problem. So it's very difficult to adapt. The most important thing for each person, each adult, is to take care of themselves. See if you can find a support group for parents with autism spectrum disorder. The HMO where I work does have one city that has a support group for parents that have autism spectrum disorder. Autism Speaks, autismspeaks.org, would also give you information on local parent support groups as well, too. And the importance of the couple taking time out for themselves to be together, to do pleasurable activities for themselves is really important. But it's a great challenge, and not just for folks with autism who might have a child with autism, but any developmental disorder, I think.
So do autistic adults have to get permission to get married?
Absolutely not. And like I mentioned before, there's 5 to 10% of them are in long-term relationships. Interestingly enough, though, as you get down to the moderate to lower functioning, what people consider dating and relationships, terminology changes. Like one young woman I was working with, she has a boyfriend. And what do her and her boyfriend do? And I'm always aware that this is a population that's very susceptible to sexual, financial, and other types of abuse. So that's because they don't understand those interactions, whether their actions are misunderstood or whether they can be victims of these is really an important issue. So I asked her more about this, and she and her boyfriend, they meet once a week and they go dancing at a local dance place. And they're dating and they're in a long-term relationship. And they're very much in love, and it's great. That's wonderful. I love it.
I love it, too. Now, Dr. LaBelle, you said you wanted some time to share something really important with our listeners. And we are coming close to the end of our program, and I'm offering you the time.
Okay, so like I said, your local library has lots of books. Go to your local library, ask them for books on autism. A great website for people who are on the spectrum, especially people who would consider themselves Asperger's, is wrongplanet.net. I love that name, wrongplanet.net.
Wrong Planet?
Run by people who are on the spectrum, and lots of great videos on how to get dates, find jobs, employment. It's a wonderful, wonderful website. AutismSpeaks.org is an autism advocacy organization in the U.S. that sponsors research and conducts awareness aimed at families, governments, and the public. A wonderful writer and a person I would highly recommend people read is John Elder Robinson, Robinson. His first book, Look Me in the Eye, was a bestseller. It talks about his experiences growing up on the spectrum. Great book, just a great book anyway, but really good book for insight. He's written a series of other books with his struggles as a parent as well, too. A good book for employment, Asperger's on the Job by Rudy Simone, R-U-D-Y, Simone, S-I-M-O-N-E. Another
Dr.
great
LaBelle,
book.
Wait,
Yeah?
because we're going to have to break, unfortunately.
Okay.
Our time is up. You are such a wealth of information. I'm wondering if we could put that list of books on my hosting page. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah, I'd be happy to give you that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, listeners, there you have it. And remember, only you can create your world that you want it, how you want it to be. Until next week, this is Dr. Ann's Relationship Radio, wishing you a wonderful week.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Are your health insurance premiums going up? You are not alone. Visit us at ObamacareWatch.org to understand why and what you can do to get us back on the right track. This is Grace Marie Turner, president of the Galen Institute. Visit us at ObamacareWatch.org.
The Docs for Patient Care Foundation is your way to join the fight and become a member of an organization created by doctors for patients, dedicated to fighting for your health care freedom and preserving the doctor-patient relationship. Get a pen and paper. Write down docs4patientcarefoundation.org. That's DOCS, the number 4. PatientCareFoundation.org. Go to our site and please make a generous tax-deductible donation and join the fight today. Thank you.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Our cross-country move, Timothy.
Listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Well, good morning and happy Monday to everybody out there. This is the Safe Senior Hour. Safe meaning seniors, abuse and financial exploitation issues, but basically things talking about just anything safe with our seniors. Hope everybody is doing well. Here in Atlanta, it's cold. They're scaring us up for a big 1 inch of snow. I know all you people in the snow country laugh at that, but everything comes to a stop, and this is Super Bowl week here in Atlanta. So we'll also have the enjoyment of all the traffic, but a lot of the great visitors from all over the United States and the world. Today we have a very special guest, the State Ombudsman for the state of Georgia, Melanie McNeil. Good morning, Melanie.
Thanks, Joe. Nice to be here.
And we as always, we start off our discussions by having everybody remember that elder abuse does not report itself. That's very important. So as we talk, if you see something, you've got to say something. It applies here. Before we ask Melanie to go into to her background and her office, there were some statistics that I saw that was very interesting. In 2014, there were approximately 15,640 nursing homes in the United States, almost 11,000 of which were for profit. And then in 2014, about 2,022 nursing homes in the United States had less than 50 beds, while around 6,900 had between 100 and 199 beds. And that's just one of the areas that seniors, certainly you look at nursing homes, but there's assisted living and personal care homes. So with that, I'm going to let Melanie give us a background. She's a great asset to everyone here in Georgia in helping to fight all types of abuse. And remember abuse, we have 3 abuses that we talk about: physical, financial, and institutional. So I'll go with that. Melanie?
Well, thanks, Joe. Glad to be here this morning to talk to your audience about what long-term care ombudsmen do. And just to tell you briefly about me, I am a lawyer. I went to law school here in Atlanta at Georgia State University, graduated in 1991. I worked for the Georgia Council on Aging for almost 11 years, and we're advocates for older adults in any kind of setting. Right. And so we worked a lot on different issues related to abuse. We've had a number of laws in Georgia that have cracked down on those who would prey on older adults and people with disabilities. Most recently, we've worked on legislation related to unlicensed personal care homes. I should also tell you that I'm the president of the National Association of State Long-Term Care Ombudsman Programs. And so that association is the association of my counterparts, the state ombudsman, in the 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and Guam. Wow. So 53 of us. And so I know your audience is across the country, so I will try and talk some about things that are relevant to everyone across the country.
Right. Obviously, there's some questions that come up that, as you just said, every state has an ombudsman's program. Are you funded by the state or by the federal government?
Well,
or a mix?
Right. In Georgia, it's a mix. Not every state gets state funding, but we're very fortunate, and I'm so grateful to our General Assembly and our governor who have provided funding for our program. The Ombudsman program is authorized through federal law through the Older Americans Act, and so we get some federal funding to provide the services. In addition, we have a state law, and I'm pretty sure every state, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and Guam also have a state or territory law that also supports them. But it's the Older Americans Act and then state law that provide our guidance on how we do what we do.
So the scope, I'm out here with a relative that's it's not living at home, but is living in another entity, like a nursing home, personal care home. How big is the scope of what the ombudsman, certainly in Georgia, and what they can look for around the country, where you all have some impact on?
Our guidance from the federal government is that we should be making visits to all of those types of facilities. So board and care homes, what are called board and care homes here, they're personal care homes, assisted living communities, and nursing homes, at least quarterly. So we should be there at least once every 3 months. Some programs, some state programs, have a lot of volunteers who help, and so they may go into the facilities even more often. Here in Georgia, in some of the areas, we have very active volunteer programs. Sometimes they go even once a week because they want to visit and get to know.
Joe, you said I could butt in every now and then, so here I go. Is your position appointed or elected or?
No, I'm hired by the State Unit on Aging Director. That's not true of every state ombudsman. Some of them are appointed by their governor, and so they change when the governor changes, but that's not what it is for me. So I'm hired as a state employee, and of course they can fire me for cause, but otherwise I don't change when administration changes. But in some states that is what happens. They are appointed by the governor.
The importance that I see as we go and give speeches or talks to elderly, seniors, and law enforcement around the state is you have regional people that work under you, right?
Yes.
Could you go over? Are they volunteers or are they employees?
We have state staff. Not state staff, paid staff.
Right.
So our office contracts with 6 nonprofit entities that cover. We've divided the state into 6 regions,
right.
And so each nonprofit entity is responsible to advocate on behalf of the approximately 12,500 residents in their area. That's nursing home, personal care home, assisted living. We also have authority to address problems in what are called community living arrangements, which are really geared toward people with developmental disabilities. We don't visit there quarterly, but we respond to complaints, and we have posters in their buildings so that families would know to maybe reach out to us. In some states, it is mostly volunteers. In some states, they are state employees. In some states, the Office of the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman is in its own standalone nonprofit agency, and they then have staff. So it varies state to state how the program is contracted. But in Georgia, we are always looking for volunteers, for people who will go and make visits. So if you live in Georgia and you have a passion for assisting residents, just call us.
And your number?
I would think this would be great for different churches to have volunteers that through the church, or they'd go out because the church would take it on, because it's almost sort of goes hand in hand to a degree.
Well, the only thing, we don't necessarily, we would work with the church if they wanted to do that. We have some requirements of the federal law and also state law about how you can, what you can do with information you might learn.
I guess the other question I was thinking about, and as I mentioned to you, I've been through this with a family member, but the spectrum. You mentioned physical abuse, food abuse, and our kitchens, and our what is the spectrum of your walking in the door and cleanliness of the place? And
right.
Give some examples that you've heard of.
Sure. Well, in my role as the state ombudsman, I actually visit one nursing home. And so advocate on behalf of those residents. So if I walked into the building and I noticed that it didn't smell very good, which happens sometimes, or this particular facility had a leak, and so there was water on the floor,
wow.
I can go ahead and talk with the facility about that problem. I don't have to have a resident give me permission to do that. Anybody could notice that that's a problem. But for some of the other problems that aren't just easily noticeable, a resident would have to tell us about it. We are not regulators either, and we're not enforcement. So if we had a complaint that the water was too hot or that there was a problem with the food, we might then refer that, if we had permission from the resident, we might refer that to the regulators, and that's called, in our state, Healthcare Facility Regulation Division of the Department of Community Health. Every state has a survey agency that's responsible. If there's a problem in the building, they can enforce the rules around what to do. And when they go in, they are inspecting, how do the bathing facilities look? How is the laundry done? Is the food kept at the right temperature?
Who does this?
So it's the Survey and Certification Agency. So here it's the Department of Community Health Facility Regulation Division.
So is that where, through you, or can a resident or a family member?
Anyone.
Can go to them?
Anyone can complain.
like I said, we had a situation where, again, it was a relative. My mother was in a nursing home, well, high-end assisted living. It wasn't quite a nursing home, but they touted themselves as, and she told a story that, quite frankly, I blew a gasket, and of what they were doing on bathing. And I couldn't believe it. It was like they were hosing them down like cattle. They'd get all the women, put them in a room, and basically hose them down. Then they'd get all the men, put them in a room, and basically hose them down. And, I went crazy. She wasn't there any longer, and
right.
I couldn't believe it. And this was 15 years ago, 20 years ago maybe. And as the son, and I have two sisters, we didn't know where to go. We didn't know what to do other than I was about ready to go after somebody in the facility. But, please keep touting yourself and telephone number. People that are listening, get a pen and paper, and we're going to give you some telephone numbers, and or call your local police department. They have, generally speaking, they have someone that's trained to go in and observe and look around. So please get a pen and paper.
Sure. Well, and just to follow up on that, if law enforcement were called into a building and it was really a regulatory thing, law enforcement should know that they can call the regulators. I think most of them know that, so that they would say, well, this doesn't look like a crime, but it does look like there's a regulatory issue. Let me call our agency. I believe that would be the case no matter where you are in the country. So what you might look for, too, your listeners, when you go into a long-term care facility, regardless of the size or the type, there should be a poster in there about the Ombudsman program, and also a poster about abuse reporting, so it will direct you how to report abuse. Now, from a realistic standpoint, I realize that often when you're going to visit a family member or a friend, you might not really be looking for posters. So this is an opportunity to kind of alert you that every facility should have one, and it should have the phone number on it. So you can call the Ombudsman program with any kind of a problem. We might not be the ones to figure out how to fix it, or it might not be within our purview, but we should know how to refer your call. So sometimes we get calls from family members, and the issue really is a legal issue. So we would be able to, refer the family on a legal issue. If it's really regulatory, I promise you, every state ombudsman knows who their regulatory agency is and would be happy to share the information about how you make a complaint. For our program, anybody can complain.
With that said, is there, and back when I'm talking about, we didn't have Googles like we have Googles today, would it be advisable to go online and
you can
address what?
You can. Well, so for your listeners, for example, we have a National Ombudsman Resource Center. So if you Google National Ombudsman Resource Center or NORC, N-O-R-C, there are several. But if you go to their website, you can see who the state ombudsman is in every state. And so then you can connect. So if you're in California and you don't know that Joe Rodriguez is your state ombudsman, you could go to the National Ombudsman Resource Center and click on the picture of California, and it'll tell you that he's the state ombudsman. Now, we as state ombudsman don't usually make the visits to facilities. We have different kinds of staff, as we discussed. But if a call comes to me, I'm going to find the ombudsman representative that serves the residents in that area and make the referral, and then they'll go out. And I know in our state we have standards of promptness. I believe every state has standards of promptness. So especially if it's something really serious, we'll get out there right away.
Well, when we come back, we're about to take a break. We'll give you some phone numbers that you can call to follow up on some of these issues. With that, we're taking our first break.
And our first break is going to be about our product that has just come aboard with America's Web Radio, and it's called the Tornado Body Dryer. You can go online, look it up, and it's great for the elderly. It's great for anyone that's handicapped, and that's you can go into your shower, take your shower. It's the only unit that installs in your shower, particularly if you have a glass door type shower or whatever. And and you can stay in the warm shower, turn off your shower, turn on the body dryer, and within 3 minutes you're totally dry and don't have to use a towel. It's great for burn patients. It's great for anyone that has any type of disability, and very reasonably priced, and it can install either in the shower or it can install outside of the shower. Again, it's called a Tornado Body Dryer. You can go online, look it up, and we appreciate them sponsoring the Safe Senior Hour on America's Web Radio. And we'll be back in, if I can find my mouse that was temporarily lost in space. And all those mice sometimes get away from you. But anyway, we appreciate it, and we'll be back right after this.
Happy Oregon homeownership is the result of a good working relationship between the home buyer and their realtor. Make buying your Oregon home a fun and rewarding experience. Get our free guide to happy Oregon homeownership. Act now, limited availability. Free at RealOregonHomes.com. That's RealOregonHomes.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.